you might be tempted to think that there's not a lot going on in Indiana when it comes to national parks. After all, there's only 3 national park sites here, and even though it is home to Indiana Dunes National Park, one of the big 63, that park is often derided as one of the worst. A sentiment I think is deeply unfair, by the way, but we'll touch on that later. Its other 2 parks are lesser known and lesser visited, and they're pretty much in the middle of nowhere, again contributing to the reputation that it might not have much to offer in the national parks department. But I'm here to hopefully convince you otherwise. In fact, that's one of my main goals with this entire state series, to highlight the national parks of each state and open your eyes to the diversity of natural, cultural, and historical resources that our national park system protects. Today, it's Indiana's turn as we dive deep into the 3 national park sites of the Hoosier State. Of course, let's start with the big guy, Indiana Dunes National Park. This park is actually a relatively new addition to the big 63 capital N, capital P national parks, but its conservation history goes way back to the 1960s when it was first protected as a national lakeshore. The national park redesignation then happened in 2019, so even though it's a new national park, it's still got a long history in the National Park Service. And since its redesignation, Indiana Dunes has kind of gotten this unfair reputation as one of the worst national parks. People say it's boring, that it isn't as scenic as the other parks, and that the steel mill is unsightly. That last part is probably true, but I don't buy all of these criticisms. Longtime viewers of this channel will know that I am an ardent defender of the parks that people love to hate, and I think Indiana Dunes is simply misunderstood. I think it's a victim of people's own expectations of monumentalism, and that we should be appreciating Indiana Dunes for what it is, not what we think it should be. This park protects about 20 miles and more than 15,000 acres of Lake Michigan shoreline. The dunes and the lake are, of course, the main draw here. They're the main attraction. They're what the park was named after and first protected for, and they're what most people come to see. But Indiana Dunes is also one of those parks with like an insane amount of sneaky hidden biodiversity. There's 2,300 different species in this park, ranking as the 4th, yes, the 4th most biodiverse unit of the entire national park system. Over 1,100 of those species are flowering plants, thanks in large part to the sheer variety of different habitat types this park has in a pretty small area. They're all densely packed together. In addition to the dunes and the lake, you'll find woodlands, prairies, savannas, bogs, and more. Indiana Dunes is right at the crossroads of a major ecological transition point in the United States. You're moving out of the eastern hardwood forests and into the Great Plains, so you're going to attract a lot of those overlapping species from those 2 areas, and it's on a major migration route between the north and the south, so you're going to get a lot of migrating species as well, particularly birds that move through here also. So I will accept all of your Indiana Dunes apologies in the comments down below. Nah, but I mean, for real, I think more people should just stop and think about the sheer abundance of life on display at Indiana Dunes National Park, and how all of that is only possible today because this landscape is protected as a national park. Like, this place probably would have been bulldozed if it wasn't for the protections that were offered here in the first place. So I think we need to try and appreciate parks like this a little more. Just appreciate the park for what it is and stop trying to compare it to something it's not. All right, moving on to southern Indiana, home of Lincoln Boyhood National Memorial. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting a Lincoln Park in Indiana, of all states. He's more famously associated with Kentucky, because that's where he was born, and Illinois, because that's where he lived, worked, and got elected president from. But Indiana played a major role in Abraham Lincoln's life, too. This is quite literally where he became a man. The Lincolns lived in the Hoosier State for 14 years, from 1816 to 1830, Abe from the age of 7 to the age of 21. Most of you will know, maybe from personal experience, that from age 7 to age 21 is a very formative time in a person's life. And yeah, this is the place that shaped a lot of Abraham Lincoln's values and his worldview. Today, this is still a very rural part of America, but back then it wasn't just rural, it was like the literal frontier of America. It was like the edge of our territory. He lived a hard and rugged life, and he and his family lived off the land here, which is actually a big historical interpretation theme at this park. There's a living history farm here, meaning the Park Service maintains and operates a farm at this site, just as the Lincolns might have back in the early 19th century. They use the same techniques and tools in an effort to show us, the visitors, how Abraham Lincoln and his family might have lived on this land in order to help us better understand the life that ultimately led Abraham Lincoln to becoming the president of the United States. Instead of just telling you about it, you can actually witness it yourself. I find that to be a very cool feature of this park and all parks who do this. I love living history demonstrations. I think it's just such an immersive way to teach about history. In addition to the farm areas of the park, there's a visitor center / museum area. This is a more traditional interpretive experience with signage and artifacts and such. And just outside of that, there's a landscaped memorial area, which is much more manicured and monumental. And finally, Indiana is home to the George Rogers Clark National Historical Park. George Rogers Clark is one of those American historical figures that nobody seems to know about, myself included. I'd never heard of the guy until I found out he had a park site dedicated to him, and then went to do the research for this episode. Although you probably do know about his younger brother, William Clark of Lewis and Clark fame. It's not really relevant to this park site, just a little bit of trivia for you. But yeah, George Rogers Clark was a Revolutionary War leader, best known for his exploits in what would ultimately become the Northwest Territories, in particular the states of Indiana and Illinois. This region was strategically important to protect from British attacks on the frontier and to establish control of the Mississippi River. The capture of Vincennes, Indiana by Clark, which the British called Fort Sackville at the time, is particularly notable because this is where the park bearing Clark's name is now today. After the war, Clark struggled to leverage his newfound fame and to establish a life beyond his military service, and he would basically struggle the rest of his life with financial issues and alcoholism. But nevertheless, today, the George Rogers Clark National Historical Park is dedicated to preserving and interpreting his life and legacy, in particular, again, those achievements during the Revolutionary War. The site is rather small at just under 25 acres and is centered around an elaborate domed memorial structure which bears 15 Doric Greek columns going around the outside. Inside the memorial stands a 7.5-foot tall bronze statue of Clark himself, surrounded by 7 16 by 28-foot murals, along with several inscriptions and quotations from Clark himself. And there you have it, all 3 national park sites in Indiana. I hope to have convinced you, or at least to have piqued your interest in the Hoosier States national park sites. States like this often get overlooked when it comes to national parks, but again, with this series, I'm trying to highlight the entirety of the national park system for you, so you guys get to see just how widespread the influence and the impact that the national parks have across America. Not just our big 63, but all of the smaller parks too. Let me know in the comments how many of these you've been to in Indiana and which site was your favorite. As always, direct support is always appreciated over on Patreon. I'm trying to talk about national parks on this channel in a different way than you would typically see on this website, which isn't always easy, and I rely a lot on the support of my community to do that. So thank you for your support over there, and thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.